Ever feel like you're just pouring information into your brain and it just disappears? Like you read something, highlight it, think you've got it, but later, poof, gone.
Yeah, that feeling of information overload is, well, it's pretty common.
We totally get it. And today we're exploring a surprisingly powerful way to make information actually stick.
hmm We're doing a deep dive into something called the testing effect.
Huh.
You might also hear it called retrieval practice.
Exactly. And it sounds a bit backwards, right? But the basic idea is that actively trying to remember something, pulling it out of your memory, that actually helps you learn it better long term, much better than just, passively rereading your notes again.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And to really get our heads around this, we've looked at some really interesting stuff. We've got bits from the retrieval practice advantage and also this very detailed survey note that analyzes the testing effect in cognitive science.
Yeah, that survey pulls from all over, doesn't it? Like Encyclopedia, MDPI, Science Direct, Silo, Brazil. And even educational blogs like Inner Drive, which offer a more practical take. So it's a good mix of deep science and real-world application.
So our mission today really is to unpack this. What is the testing effect?
Yeah.
Why does the science say it works so well? And crucially, how can you actually use this to learn things more effectively?
Right. Let's start there. What are we actually talking about when we say testing effect?
Okay, yeah. Defining it.
Well, at its heart, it's about how actively pulling information out of your memory strengthens that memory. Encyclopedia MDPI puts it pretty clearly. Long-term memory is often increased when some of the learning period is devoted to retrieving the to-be-remembered information.
So that act of retrieval, that pulling it out, that's the key thing.
Yes, exactly. It's not passive. Science Direct adds another layer, too. They talk about how retrieval helps with backward retention, which is basically remembering the stuff you retrieve.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
But also, interestingly, it creates forward effects. That means it can actually make it easier to learn new things that are related down the line. Oh, wow. So it prepares your brain for future learning, too.
Sort of, yeah. And Silo, Brazil really hammers this home, stating that retrieving information increases the long-term retention of that information. It's that active process quizzes, flashcards, even just trying to mentally summarize what you just read. That's retrieval practice.
Right. So it's not just about doing practice questions where you already know the answers by heart. It's the mental effort, isn't it? Even if you kind of struggle a bit.
That struggle is actually productive.
And I remember reading somewhere that even if it's low stakes, like not for a grade, that effort still counts.
Well, absolutely. Inner Drive points that out. Even low-stress, non-judgmental recall helps. It's about firing up that retrieval mechanism.
Okay. So we know what it is. But, is this just a nice idea or is the evidence really there? What do the actual studies show? Does it really work?
Oh, the evidence is remarkably strong, really consistent across lots of different studies. Science Direct talks about research comparing practice tests directly against just, spending more time studying the material again.
And what's the verdict?
Overwhelmingly, the practice tests lead to much better long-term memory, especially when the final test, the one that matters, is, say, a week later or more.
That kind of feels right, doesn't it? Like forcing your brain to work prepares it better than just passively looking at the info again.
Exactly. And some of the results are pretty dramatic. There's a classic study, Wheeler and Roediger from '92. They looked at remembering pictures.
Pictures, okay.
Yeah, and they found an 80% improvement in recall after a week just by testing people 3 times compared to just restudying.
80%. Just from testing.
Just from testing. And then there's another big one, Roediger and Karpik in 2006. They compared students who studied, then took 3 tests, versus students who just studied 4 times.
Okay.
After a week, the group that did the testing remembered significantly more. It wasn't even close.
Wow. 80%. That's hard to argue with. And you mentioned those backward and forward effects earlier. Can you break those down a bit more? What do they mean practically?
Sure. So the backward effect is the straightforward one. Testing helps you remember the actual stuff you tested yourself on. Pretty obvious, right?
Right. Test it. Remember it better.
But the forward effect is, I think, really cool, especially for learning complex topics. Think about it like learning math. If you really solidify your grasp of algebra by testing yourself, you actually build stronger connections in your brain. And that makes it easier to learn calculus later on. It's not just remembering the algebra, it's preparing your brain for what comes next.
Ah, I see. So it builds a better foundation, making it easier to add new stuff on top.
Precisely. And another key point, even when you try to recall something and you can't quite get it or you get it wrong, that's still useful.
Really? Even getting it wrong?
Yeah. Research by Izawa and later Cornell and others suggests that even those failed attempts can help you encode the information better when you eventually see the right answer. Plus, Cornell and Bjork found that loads of students, like 68%, use quizzes specifically to figure out what they don't know.
That's so important. Knowing your weak spots. Otherwise, you just keep reviewing the easy stuff. Right.
Exactly. You focus your effort where it's needed.
Okay, so testing works. We get that. But can we make it work better? Are there ways to optimize retrieval practice?
Definitely. The research points to a few key factors. One is the retention interval. That's just the time gap between learning something and testing yourself on it.
Okay.
Science Direct notes that the longer that gap, the bigger the advantage of testing over restudying becomes. So spacing out your tests really helps for long-term memory.
Huh. That totally goes against the urge to cram everything in right before an exam.
It absolutely does. But cramming is terrible for long-term retention. Spacing is key. Also, it seems that more retrieval opportunities, testing yourself more often, and having a higher ratio of testing compared to just restudying, that generally leads to better results too.
More tests, less passive reading.
Basically, yeah. And then there's the idea of test spacing. So not just spacing the test from the initial learning, but spacing out the tests themselves. Studies by Carpenter and Deloche and Pike and Rawson show that increasing the time between tests also boosts memory.
So it's not just testing often, but strategically timing those tests. Like test yourself today, then maybe in 3 days, then in a week or something.
Exactly, that kind of pattern. And feedback makes a difference too.
Ah, knowing if you got it right or wrong.
Right. Now, the testing effect does happen even without feedback, especially if you're getting more than half right anyway. But research, like a study by Kang and colleagues, shows the benefit is usually bigger with feedback.
That makes sense. Otherwise, you might just keep remembering the wrong answer if you don't get corrected.
Precisely. But it's interesting, the main benefit seems tied directly to that effortful retrieval process itself. It's not really about, say, the test format matching how you learned it, which is called transfer-appropriate processing, or just having some goal while studying. The core mechanism is the retrieval.
Okay, so we've covered the what, it's active recall, and the how spacing, feedback, frequency. Now, the big question, why? Why does this work? What's happening in the brain?
Well, there isn't just one single answer, but there are several leading theories. One popular one is the retrieval effort hypothesis.
Okay.
The idea here is pretty simple. The harder you have to work to pull that memory out, the stronger that memory trace becomes. Like lifting weights, more effort builds more strength.
That's a good analogy. Makes intuitive sense.
Then there's the elaborative retrieval hypothesis. This one suggests that when you test yourself, you're not just finding the memory, you're also thinking about it in new ways, connecting it to other things you know.
So you build more pathways to it.
Exactly. More mental routes to get to that information later. It makes the memory more flexible and accessible.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense too.
And a third idea is the episodic context account. This focuses on how testing helps reinforce the original context, where and when you learned it, making that specific memory easier to pinpoint later. There's also evidence, like from Carpenter and colleagues back in 2006, suggesting testing helps you transfer what you learned to new situations, especially with complex stuff.
So multiple reasons why this mental workout is so beneficial. It's like the brain goes, they needed this information, better make it easier to find next time.
Kind of, yeah. It prioritizes information that you actively use.
So given all this evidence, all these compelling theories, surely everyone's doing this right. Are students using retrieval practice all the time?
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But actually, no,
Yeah.
it's surprisingly uncommon.
Really?
Yeah, the sources we looked at, like Science Direct, mentioned studies showing very few students actively use retrieval practice as their main study method. Carpix's research found only about 11% listed it. And Cornell and Bjork found only around 18% chose self-testing specifically to find their knowledge gaps.
Only 11 to 18%. That's wild. It seems like such a powerful tool. What are they doing instead? Just rereading notes over and over.
That seems to be the default for many, yeah. Passive rereading, maybe highlighting, which feels productive, but the research shows it's much less effective for long-term memory.
Wow.
And this is where places like InterDrive really try to bridge that gap. They emphasize how beneficial regular low-stress testing can be, improving memory, boosting confidence, and leading to better performance, whether it's exams or just learning a new skill.
Okay, so how do we fix this? How can educators, or just anyone learning anything, actually start using the testing effect more effectively? What are some practical steps?
The main thing is making it a habit. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be complicated. Inner Drive suggests things like using old exam papers if you're a student, or teachers incorporating quick, low-stakes, multiple-choice quizzes. Even just asking students to write down everything they remember about a topic before the lesson, or trying to write a summary from memory afterwards. For self-study, flashcards are great. Or literally just putting your notes away and trying to recall the key points out loud or by jotting them down.
So simple things done regularly.
Exactly. And that self-testing piece is crucial for finding those weak spots, so you know where to focus your actual studying or review time.
Right, making your study time much more efficient. Now, are there any catches? Does the testing effect work for everything all the time, or are there limitations?
It's a good question. While it's very broadly effective, some sources, like one cited in PMC, suggest its impact might be a bit less pronounced for really, really complex material where maybe deep understanding requires more than just recall.
Okay, so maybe for foundational knowledge it's amazing, but for highly abstract concepts.
It's still likely beneficial, but maybe needs to be combined with other strategies.
Oh,
Also, CBE Life Sciences Education points out that there's been less research specifically on how testing affects very high-level cognitive skills, like, say, complex problem-solving or creativity.
so that's maybe an area for more research down the road.
Definitely. It's a powerful tool, incredibly robust for factual learning and building understanding, but we're still learning about its role in developing those really top-tier skills.
That's a fair point. It's a tool, maybe not the only tool, but a really important one.
Precisely. Use it strategically.
Okay, so as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, what's the single most important thing you want people listening to take away from all this?
I think the core message is actively trying to retrieve information is way more powerful for your long-term memory and understanding than just passively reviewing it. Don't just reread, recall.
Right, engage that retrieval muscle. And by doing that, by making self-testing, a regular thing, you're not just going to remember stuff better. You'll also get a much better handle on what you actually know versus what you think you know, which probably leads to more efficient studying, maybe even less stress in the long run.
Absolutely. It makes your learning much more targeted and effective.
So here's maybe a final thought for everyone listening. How could you, like right now, bring some simple self-testing into whatever you're trying to learn? What's one small change you could make today, just a little tweak, to start using this power of retrieval?
Yeah, what's that first step you could take?
Some really good food for thought there. And hey, if you want to explore any of this further, the sources we mentioned, Science Direct, Inner Drive, the research papers, they offer a ton more detail. Definitely worth checking out.